Right, before you start recording, can you just do a proper nice little income rather than it gets us all bickering between each other?
I can cut that out. It's already started.
You stupid little beep.
Right, well, welcome to our first podcast, ladies and gentlemen, that are done by MancBuses and the associate team. To keep it simple, we'll go through who we are for our first one, and then we'll go from there. So I'm Jordan. We've got Caleb, Sean, and Scott.
Hi.
Who's attempting to be a little girl at the moment.
He's a little girl. Yeah. Well,
Down now. Downhill. No complaints so far, boys.
So, our first topic is going to be people who want to join the industry or are already just started in the industry, and tips and little things that we think is appropriate for new drivers to either learn or take on board. We've all been there, apart from Caleb, who is yet to get there, but he's probably going to be there in the next few years, hopefully. Yeah.
My advice is run while you still can.
We all have a different level of experience, and
Jordan being having none.
and we'll go from there. So I'm sure that Scott, being the one that's started his test in 1927, has quite a few hints and tricks to say.
Well, really, I don't really have any hints and tricks to say, really. It's just obviously I passed my licence in 2014. It was one of the better experiences, and it was one of the better things to obviously job-wise. It's a guaranteed income. It's a guaranteed job. And to be fair, the job is what you make it. From experience, obviously, you're going to have your really, really rough days, but you're also going to have your really, really good days. So obviously, the job is what you make the job to be. You could make the job as hard as you want to make it, or you can also make the job as easy as you want to make it, but obviously within the law and within reason.
Hang on a minute, you passed your test in 14?
Yes, passed my licence in 2014, August 2014 to be precise.
Bloody hell, I thought you were driving much longer than that. I only passed 2 years after you.
You see, Jordan, that's the thing, I'm professional and you're not.
The 2 years makes a difference.
With that, Jordan, I passed 2 years after you because I passed in 18.
Well, it's good 6 years spread, this, isn't it?
Yeah.
That
Forget
means
about me, I've not even started yet.
Wow.
You'll get there one day.
Yeah. Might
One day.
Eventually.
You'll regret it.
Very much so.
So, me and Sean have both worked, well, we've all worked for the same company at one point. We can't mention them for legal names, but for legalities, we'll call them Slave. And then...
No comment.
Yeah. And then we've moved on. 2 of us have moved on. Well, we moved on to coaches, and then we moved on to where we are now. And Sean is no longer essentially in the industry.
No, I'll enjoy my fancy supercars and whatever else, yeah. We'll leave it at that.
So
I still do drive buses, though. I do it well-ish.
What, minibuses?
No, I don't drive any minibuses. More, what the biggest I drive is a BMW X7, but then we've got our bus. So, the bus that you've not driven yet.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I'm going to take that for tyres, so yeah, I will do. So, I was speaking to Scott just before we recorded, and it was a lot of the things that newer drivers fall into is they start worrying about everything, especially when they get on their own. And it's the case of, I'm running late, so I'll go a bit quicker, and a bit quicker, and a bit quicker. And
then before you know it, bang.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's where mistakes are made.
Exactly.
You've just got up the taxi in front of you. He's got a 14-seater minibus. and you've got 14 claims coming your way.
Exactly. So one of the big things is don't worry about it. You know, it's you're late at the end of the day. The passengers, as much as they do complain sometimes, they don't care as long as they get to where they're going.
Well, as being a driver mentor, one of my favourite sayings used to be, you've always got an excuse for being late, but you've never got an excuse for being early. And not only you're running late, I'm sure the passengers like to get to the end destination in one piece without any injuries. Then obviously getting from one place to a hospital A&E ward with several injuries. I mean, there's one thing you cannot do whilst driving a vehicle, especially a vehicle of that size, is speed and act like a tool. If you're late, you're late. There's nothing you can do for it. And like Jordan's just said, as soon as you try making time up, or as soon as you try cutting corners, is when you start making mistakes. And then mistakes can be minor mistakes where you have a little bump. It could be a major mistake where you have a serious accident, or it could be an intermediate mistake where you cause damage to public property. At which point is when you sat in front of the manager explaining yourself of how you did it and why did you do it. At the end of the day, if you're a new driver, you do not take silly risks. You just take your time and you get there along the way. I mean, I think on average, I think it takes at least 6 to 7 months before you get used to driving a vehicle and you get used to driving a vehicle in service. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'll never forget my first accident. I was running slightly delayed to go to a starting point. I'm not going to say where for legality reasons, but I took a turn too short and ended up putting a nice, let's say, 3-panel scratch down the side of a brand new bus. And that's due to obviously not paying much attention, trying to do the job as quick as possible, and losing concentration with lack of experience caused that accident. In turn, got me a 6-month warning on my file.
See, I was a bit lucky than that. My first one, yeah, I was rushing a bit, but I just decided that my wing mirror looked better in the bus in front, especially through the back window. And
I mean,
you what?
I mean, Kayla, I think for Kaylan from experience, obviously he's been on a bus with a new driver. And
Yeah,
I don't know, have you been on the bus with a new driver? What your experience has been, whether it's been a nice experience or it's been a scary experience. I mean, obviously, from a non-driver perspective, I'd like to hear what you've got to say on that, Kaylan.
So a few months ago, well, yeah, I've had quite a few new drivers, but it's nice to see people actually get into the industry, and it's quite a nice feeling knowing that there's more people actually trying to join, trying to help the community out driving. Like, it's not scary, but it's they learn, like they go slow and then they concentrate, and it's nice to see concentration and actually taking pride in what they're doing when they start. But you notice there's not many new people around at the moment. I've noticed that.
Well, I think go on.
I was going to say, it's okay in the industry, obviously, as a perspective of a young person who obviously wants to progress, obviously, in his later life to obviously become a bus driver and do things. Have you noticed any differences between the way that some people who may have been driving new drivers, I know you just said, obviously, that they're sensible, obviously, to take the time, and it's like there's more concentration. Would you feel better getting on a bus with a brand new driver who's just come out on the road, or would you feel better being with a driver who's been driving buses for 10, 15 years? What sort of difference, as a passenger, do you notice, and what do you think, obviously, helps and doesn't help, obviously, being in that position where you're sat down as a passenger?
Right. So if it's if you've actually noticed it's a new driver, if it's not a new driver, then you think you're more safe with people, more professional, been doing it for a longer amount of time. You just feel like there's they take more caution, they know what they're doing. But new ones, you just think, oh, they're still getting into it, something might happen.
Well, you might never get there if they take a wrong turn.
Well, there's that, but adding on to that, with new drivers, you might have them take the wrong turn, they might be overcautious, they might be late. Then you might have an experienced driver that gets too cocky and is throwing it round corners, being uncomfortable, squeezing through tight gaps too fast.
knocking down walls.
Yeah. You know, rather than driving defensively,
Yeah.
they're driving aggressively. You know, you've got both sides to it. You know, swings and roundabouts. You could have an experienced driver that's absolutely mint, but then you could have an experienced driver that thinks they know it all, is throwing it round corners because the green road's not working and whatever else. Or you could have a new driver that's, you know,
Edit
even
that
with a
bit,
new
edit
driver,
that bit.
you could have a new driver that's driving nice and sensibly, but then you could also have them being very hesitant, which is causing more of an issue because they don't know the vehicle properly. It swings and roundabouts for both sides.
See, I mean, totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I was just trying to find a perspective, obviously, from a non-driver, obviously, what they would feel the most comfortable with. I mean, from experience, obviously, I'm not going to say I was the best driver when I first started driving because there was, like you said, Sean, obviously, I made quite a few silly mistakes, obviously, braking too hard, braking last minute, drive a bus like you drive a car. I mean, there's all that sort of stuff, obviously, as a new driver, but you've got to sort of that with experience, obviously, slowly it starts sinking in, which is why I said previously, I reckon a new driver, it takes about 6 months before they become a sort of a professional driver as such, because I think it's about 6 months being on your own on the road is where you start learning things yourself. I mean, I don't know if yourself, Jordan and Sean, obviously when you first passed your test, how long was it before you both had the first incident, or as in a passenger fall or an accident or anything like that? I mean, what was your experience, obviously, when you first went on the road?
Mine wasn't too bad, to be fair. I managed to dodge that bullet for about 2 years before I had my first incident. I mean, I had passengers in the first lot shout at me, but that's due to me trying to make the job harder than it needed to be. And I quickly sort of, as you mingle in with people at the depot, you sort of quickly realise after a while it's just not worth the hassle. But I think it's worth saying that even after time, we're at an advantage because where we are, we only do a few routes, so you sort of learn where you can make up a bit of time or where you know you're going to lose time, so you tend to relax a lot more with that sort of, because you know that, oh, you're going to lose 10 minutes there, but you're going to gain the 10 minutes back later down the road. I think that's a great advantage, where with the bigger companies where we started off, you do that many routes and it changes that much, and they change the timings and everything else that much, you just never know. So I think in that sort of scenario, it can be very easy to allow the I'm running late and I need to hurry up and then having a bump to catch up on you, essentially, if you know what I mean.
I agree with that. I mean, Sean, what was your experience?
What with first bump? It was first bump. I was doing, it was during my route training. I was doing it after everyone else did route training because there was a couple of people that were ahead of me. Said I would do a from Piccadilly to Hattersley, and I misunderstood the instructions I was given by the driver that I was with, and swung too late, and smacked the overhanging mirror on an MMC off a street sign. Luckily, I didn't break it or break a window or anything. But the sign, as far as I'm aware, is still bent to this day.
That's probably because it never got reported.
Well, no, there is that. Dum-de-dum-de-dum.
It's there's a lot to take on as a new driver. It's not too bad when you're with your mentor, because when you're with your mentor, if you're struggling with the ticket machine or the route, you can like turn to your mentor and go, oh, is it left, or and they can help you out. But I remember the day I remember the most is the first day when I turned up at, I think it was like 5:30 in the morning, first day on my own, and it's the case of you looked at the running board and it was sort of like, oh, logistics, and it was like running private up to logistics, and at the time it's not like you do it in the daylight, but then you're going in at 5:30 in the morning, it's now night time, and you're like, yeah, got to try and remember your way up to logistics, and that was an interesting trip. And then it turned out I was like halfway there, and these buses, as I kept pulling over to read my notes, all these buses kept passing me. I'm like, I'll just follow them, and that made it a bit easier.
You see, sorry, go on, Sean. So I was going to say, so it's similar to that, Jordan. Obviously, my experience, obviously as a new driver. I remember the first day out on my own. It was what we've been route learned, but we've been route learned it once. And I went to go dead to this route learning. It was pitch black, it was foggy, and I missed the right turn. And I'd never forget having to reverse a double-decker bus up a one-way street to turn the thing around because I hadn't got a clue where I was. I was in the middle of nowhere. It was foggy, it was dark. I managed to do it without causing any damage, but for the rest of that morning, I wasn't driving to what I would say my full potential because I was more worried about what I'd done in the morning.
Yeah, it sort of lasts down on you, doesn't it? The first days are always the most nerve-wracking because you've got so much to think about, and especially, I think it more so with the bigger companies because it's hard to. The passengers sometimes might not actually understand that you're a new driver. To them, you're just a driver, and you should know where you're going. You should know all the tickets. You should know this. You should. But the reality of it is you have so much training to learn how to drive the bus. Then you have a few days, if you're lucky, in an office, learning everything, and then it's sort of like, oh, you go out route learning, and then you're on your own, and at that point you've got to remember everything. And
it's not even. With that though, with ticket machines, it's not even like it's a few days. I remember when I was training it.
About half a day, wasn't it?
It was half a day. But the thing is, I went into that room knowing a lot more because I'd found Jordan's videos, which is how I originally found the MancBuses, and that gave me a bit of an insight to the ticket machines.
Oh, that's a selfless plug right there, isn't it?
It's good. No, but honestly, I went into that room, I logged into the machine, guessed the password and everything. People turned around and was like, how do you know that? How do you know how to do multi-tickets and whatever else? But it's one of those things, it was just, I was trying to find stuff out. I was Googling it on YouTube and whatever else, so I had a bit of an inkling of what I was walking into, and it paid off.
Well, I mean, I agree with what you say there, Sean. Obviously, I think, the MancBuses channel, with obviously all the routes and the route learning things on it, obviously, the only thing I was gutted about, obviously, that there was no routes, obviously, for the depot which I was obviously working for. Nobody had obviously done them routes at that time, so obviously it was all learn as you go along. But I mean, obviously, with Jordan's original videos, obviously doing certain routes at certain times with his GoPro, I thought were quite cool for the simple reason it was a good aspect, obviously, for drivers to look at and go, actually, that's what you're going to be doing. Yeah. Looking back now at MancBuses, and obviously there's other YouTubers out there. I don't know if I can mention names legally.
You can YouTube channels, yeah, you'd be able to.
Well, there's the Flat Cap bus driver. I think he's based in Leeds or
I'm not
Yorkshire.
Sure. Yorkshire.
Is it Yorkshire?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at his videos, he does obviously like the different routes, what he does and all the rest of the stuff. And you look at it, you think it's quite interesting because somebody who's coming to the business could look at them videos and go, well, that's the company I want to work for in the future. That's the company I'm interested in working for. They seem a nice company and I can get ahead of the gang, if to say so, because you've got a bit more of an insight into what the job role is and you've got a better insight to which way the route goes. I mean, some people think the bus route goes whichever way the bus driver wants. I remember a passenger once saying to me, when I asked where he was going to, he went, oh, I'm going with my brother's. Well, where's your brother lived? Oh, just down there. Well, where's down there? And you think, bloody hell. But obviously, you need to get an insight of the routes and stuff. And eventually, like you're saying with passengers, you get a bit of a rapport with a passenger. So you start getting to remember certain passengers get on at certain bus stops, certain passengers get off at certain bus stops, and you get to know that stuff. But as a new driver going on the road, until you've had them on your bus 4, 5, 6 times, you're basically out in the world on your own. So, like I said, obviously with Jordan's videos, if you look at him and obviously the flat cap bus driver, with his videos, obviously somebody who's going into the business and somebody says, oh, I'm just going with my brother who lives on, for argument's sake, Pigs Lane, you can go, oh, I know where that is straight away, rather than thinking, oh, I'm a bit stuck now.
I think that's one of the hardest things to learn are the road names, because people expect us to be a postman, and people
I think you think you're a sat nav sometimes.
We'll get on the bus and go, do you go to this postcode? Oh, bloody no.
Yeah, I've had that far too many times, and even now, half the routes that I drove, it's like I don't know road names. Whenever I was looking at diversions, it'd be a case of pull up the map. Don't be scared if you're looking at your diversion board. Pull out your phone, type in a road name, and get your bearings. There's nothing to worry about with doing that. I used to do it all the time.
Yeah,
and there's only
go on.
Sorry, there's only one thing I'll say about if you're on the road doing that. Obviously, there's certain companies which obviously prefer to switch off the engine and get out of the cab to look at maps and stuff if you're out on the road. But obviously, if you're in a bus depot and you can see there's a diversion on the board, yeah, sure, I agree totally with you there. Get your phone out, have a look at Google Maps or anything like that. I mean, Google Maps is a good one because Google Maps, you can put bus stops in. I think it's Google Maps where it brings up bus stops as well. So you can see which route a bus takes. And obviously, if you're on a slight divert, and say, for example, there's one company I worked for, I went on a diversion, you said you followed the 21, the 22, the 17. And you think, wow, what roads?
The other...
But at least Google Maps gives you a little bit more of an insight, looking at it live time or looking at it on maps, especially where you can do street view, is you get your bearings by going, as a bus driver, I know when I get to that point, there's a church on the right-hand side, I turn right at the church. I follow it all the way down. There's a camper van always parked on that road there where I'm turning left, and you're turning left there. I mean, like Sean was saying, you don't know road names.
No.
You go off landmarks, what you pick
landmarks.
Yourself.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different landmark for anything else, and obviously, as you're going along, you'll make your own landmarks up, or you might make jokes about things saying, oh, look, there's the cat lady's house because she's always got loads, 10, 15 cats in the front bloody garden. Or you could, just things like that, or...
Don't be afraid.
There's the boy racer's house because he's got two RSs on the driveway and things like that.
And just don't be afraid in the depot to ask other drivers. It's a lot of the other drivers will all use the same landmarks as you do. So you might not understand it on a map, but then they might go, well, you know, when you get to that roundabout with the big screen in the middle of it, you do a left there, you go past the shop, you do a right, and you know it makes a lot more sense than how a certain company issue them to bus companies where you turn left onto Neil Lane, you go 4 onto 5, and you do the second left, and you get lost because half the time them instructions are a load of rubbish anyway.
The overemphasize on road names and overcomplicate things rather than make it stupid simple, which I think is the best way to do road diversions. They make it the hard way. If you did something like I'm not going to say the name, but say somebody who's in charge of certain things, when they put diversions in the city centre, and they will do left this road, right that road, right that road, right that road, left that road, down that road, rather than say
follow the 142.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going the same as the 142 to the aquatic centre, then you want to turn right.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
but adding on to that is the time you will always be better asking another driver than an allocator or someone that works within the depot, just because other drivers they're on the road just as much as you majority of the time, unless they're a part-timer.
See, that'd work, but where we currently work, if you get diversion out in the countryside, you can't use that cow, you need to turn left.
Yeah.
At the field full of sheep. At the field full of sheep, you turn right.
This is basing it on working in Manchester, because that's all I've done. Obviously, you've done further afield.
Well, I could say about the Scott diversion where I was told to go up the A5 1555, whatever it was, turn left onto this road, and the road gets narrow. Going up the road thinking, bloody hell, it is now. I've got about a millimetre on either side of the bus. 45 minutes later, comes back to where the road traffic collision was. How the hell I got back to where I was going all around these country roads for 45 minutes, I haven't got a clue. So it's now called the Scott diversion, and still to this day I haven't got a clue which way I should have gone or shouldn't have gone. But when you're in the middle of nowhere, you've got no signal on your phone to check your Google Maps, you've got no A to Z because you never carried A to Z of every single area you cover, and you think, oh God. And you've got 6 passengers on board the vehicle who are sightseers. You think, oh no.
I think on that note, it's important to point out that if you are somewhere that you do not know, it is more and more important to look out for any road signs where it will tell you where your vehicle is not suitable to go down there. If you're in a
I agree with that.
double
Low
low bridges
low
is a big
bridges.
one. If you're not sure, do not go under it. Or get out and
Same
have
with
a look.
us.
Make sure you know the height of your vehicle. Because the last
I'd
thing
say
you
that.
want is not knowing where you're going and asking a passenger to go, yeah, you can go left down here. You go left, you miss the sign and you hit a bridge. Because at the end of the day, that's your fault. So I think, especially if you don't know where you're going, paying even more attention to the signs that are around you is more important. Because the traffic commissioner will not go for, well, I didn't know where I was. And I missed all the signs and the big low bridge sign on the bridge, but the passenger told me I could fit under here.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's exactly the same as width restrictions as well, and
Yeah.
weight restrictions.
Width and weight. Yep.
Weight restrictions, width restrictions always as well, because you don't want to be going down a narrow road, realising there's a 6'6" barrier at the end of that road. You're on a bus, and then you've got to reverse that bus a mile and a half back, because that's not a very nice thing to do. Let me tell you.
Oh no, well we do a lot of reversing, don't we, at the moment in the countryside, down our country lanes where we have to sort of let other cars go.
I mean,
Go on.
Caelan, I've got a question for you. Obviously, you listening to us as professional drivers.
Yeah.
How's this an insight for you? Obviously, when you want to become a bus driver in the future, is this daunting to you? Is it nerve-wracking, or is it interesting information? What are you getting from this conversation now? That's another thing I'd like to hear now.
It's interesting and it's useful at the same time. Because if you're gonna go down these diversions, you're gonna do all this, then you just gotta take caution on what you're doing. Because like you said, the last thing you want is going to a low bridge where you have to reverse a mile and a half back, or going down a sharp country lane. You don't want that to happen. And you might think, oh well, it's a shortcut, I'll take it, but you never know. It's better to be late than never get there at all.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, have any of you ever took a wrong turn, or has anybody else ever took a wrong turn and come up to where they've realised, obviously, that's it, I'm stuck, what the hell do I do now?
Yeah, running dead from logistics to the Trafford Centre, I found the low bridge at the canal. And then I believe Sean found the same low bridge a few days later at the canal. Or was it?
Not encountered.
Or was it?
No.
I've got a feeling who it was, who we can't name for other legal reasons. But I remember I did it, and I gave him the instructions, and I said, "Do not turn down the first exit on that roundabout. It will take you down that road, the sat nav, but there's a low bridge." And he went down it and found the low bridge. Luckily, he did the same as me and turned round. That was quite lucky because it's like an industrial estate entrance, so it was an easy swing it round. But I think the other thing to emphasise is where me and Scott are, reversing is pretty much normal. In the city centre, it's not normal, and companies prefer you not to do it. But you see all these videos out there with drivers that would just sit with get the newspaper out instead of just getting out the way if need be. Sometimes it's a lot easier for you to go back than it is to try and get someone who in a car who can't reverse said car to try and go backwards. Although it is more entertaining to watch them attempt to reverse it, sometimes if it's safe enough for you to do it, it's easier just for you to get out the way and let them get on the business, as well as you're just causing unnecessary confrontation.
Well, I mean, I've got a question for you there, Jordan, because I was always under the knowledge, I don't know whether it's just company procedure, but I was always under the knowledge of fact you're not supposed to reverse a vehicle with passengers on board unless you're in a designated bus stop or bus station. I mean, I don't know whether that's true or whether that's false.
I believe that is a very old wife's tale, so to speak. A lot of companies' policies dictate that you shouldn't reverse on a public road without a banksman for obvious reasons. But at the same point, if you've got a reversing camera, say, and you can see out of it, that's as good as a banksman. If you use the camera in your mirrors and, and to be fair, to anyone behind you, I know it's at bus stations, it tends to go over the reds, but if the big beeping noise and the fact the vehicle's moving backwards, is lost on the motorists that behind you, then maybe they shouldn't be on the road. I mean, I've had it where I've had to reverse before now, and they just sit behind you, and you're like, which bigger sign would you like that we need to go backwards? And they eventually get the picture when the bus starts crawling towards them. But again, if you're not sure, get out and have a look. Don't just slap it in reverse and go backwards. If you're not sure whether something's behind you or not, get out and check first.
Yeah, I've been there and done that when I shouldn't have, but I did. I was doing part life duties, and it was the first time of me doing it, and we got told to go back to depot, and I can't remember where it was. All I remember was there was a library somewhere at the corner. I've turned right, and there's a road's about 5 lanes wide, 2 lanes in each way, and a nice chevron island in the middle. I've decided to swing it round and do a 3-point turn. As I've reversed back, all I've heard is a bang and a scream. That was me hitting the bus stop with people sat at. I then put it into drive and drove off, didn't report it. But
Sean, did you report any of your accidents?
Yes, I did. It's not the best thing to do. There was no damage to the bus, so it was one of them. You know, it would have landed me in more trouble reporting it than it would have not reporting it.
I remember when I was at the first place of employment, one of the guys' tricks was to parallel park in the depot, and that landed him in a bit of trouble each time.
I think I know exactly. Short ass.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it you know, the teach you to reverse for a reason, and as long as you're doing it safely, then you know. But I think the rule that you was referring to, I think it's an old wives' tale, because a lot more bus stations now are becoming driving reverse out, and I think
the short term is Dyros.
Yes, but there's some in London that I've seen where you have to reverse into them with passengers on, and drive out of them rather than driving reverse out. So they are becoming more common because they do save a lot of space, but it just depends on the people. I mean, there's a certain airport where it's an absolute nightmare because no one seems to care.
So, I know which airport you're on about. I've never driven up there myself in a bus, but it is a nightmare, and even more so with the way they've made the entrance coming in from the road. You know, rather than coming in from the other end where the exit is, where you just come from a roundabout, swing it round, and then go in.
Yeah, I've noticed that it's quite a sharp turn.
Loads of room.
Well, it's not the most. It's almost like you do a 180-degree turn on yourself. That's what it's like, passenger perspective. When a driver goes too fast around it, you know, you often tend to throw yourself off the seat.
That's all the fun.
Yeah, I know.
You know, it's just, as a new driver, I always think of the passengers and giving them the best ride possible.
You've got to think of Doris sitting right at the back in the middle seat, right at the end of the walkway. You've got to try and keep her in a seat without sending her through that front window or slamming her head off either side. You know, you've got to protect her. You know, she's a 70-year-old woman, sat right at the back in the middle with no seatbelt on.
Yeah, but the temptations when she's getting off to just, as she comes flying down the aisle, it just gets her off a bit quicker.
That's a new driver. You know, you've got to treat everyone as if they're 70-year-old Doris. You know,
as I always call it. No, I don't call it 71 Doris. Obviously, as a new driver, obviously you stick to the regulations and you wait for that passenger to sit down nicely. You make sure that they put the walking stick next to him. You make sure the shopping trolley's in front of him. And they've managed to put the bus pass away because they don't like you driving before the bus pass is in the handbag. But then obviously over time, as you get used to it, you just play granny bingo.
Well,
That's what
you sort of
that's what I call the game, and I just go, I'm sorry, love, but you're having that third seat right hand side, boom, and they're down.
So there's nothing. See, there's nothing funnier than seeing a woman or a bloke with one of them bags and wheels, the ones that they push in front of them as they go flying down the bus, holding on to the bags and wheels. But
with that, my favourite one was when they'd let go of the trolley, and you see how far down the bus you can get it.
Yeah, so we can either play Granny Bingo or we can play Wacky Races.
you do sort of get used to the sort of passengers that you can set off slowly with them. I mean, if they've got a walking stick and they're struggling to walk, then it's a very clear you wait for them to sit down. But
If they've got a walking stick, I make sure I put the accelerator hard down to the floor. They sit on that first bloody seat.
But
I don't really do that. That's just evil. That's just pure evilness, and I do not do anything like that. Really, that's very unprofessional to say something like that as well.
But I'm sure that the three. Well, I'm sure all of us have seen it before, where a passenger will get on. They don't have to be elderly, and they'll go, "Can you wait for me to sit down, please, driver?" And you oblige because you got to. And they sit down, and then as soon as you set off, they start playing musical bloody chairs.
There's that, but then there's also the point of
When they get up 4 stops before the stop.
yeah, and they start walking down the bus to get off.
Yeah, I'm in full
Then
agreement.
they can't sit down while you're moving. But as you do progress, you will be able to go, right, I can move off slowly with this one. The young, we can move off whenever. Oh, she's got a shopping trolley, we'll give her a couple of minutes to sit down and then we'll move off.
It's like the other thing that keeps hearing its nose into the news at the moment is people in wheelchairs on buses. Now, I've been reported before now for refusing to allow a certain passenger in Piccadilly Gardens on the bus that was in a wheelchair. We all know who I mean.
I know who you mean.
But you find like there's a few in Macclesfield area where they don't want you to get the ramp out. They don't want any special treatment. All they want, they'll pull themselves onto the bus. But yet, from an outsider to suspect them like Caleb, if you're sat on the bus not knowing anything and we pull up, we don't offer to get the ramp out or anything because we know the passengers because they get on the same bus every day at the same time. But yet, then they report us for it. It's a case of, well, maybe sometimes I know the disability people at the moment are all going that they want more to be treated equal. Well, that's being treated equally. If I see they're struggling still, then I'll ask. But you sort of get used to the passengers that will just let themselves on, or you don't need to let the ramp out. Or I think there's a few in Manchester, and they come flying up the bus with the wheelchair and come flying off it, and you're like, he's getting airtime as he's getting off the bus.
Yeah, with that, people chairs and then flying on and off the bus, but with experience, you'll also be able to get it so you don't have to ramp out. You'll have it so you're perfect.
Well, that all depends whether they built the curb properly, doesn't it?
That's what I mean. You'll get it perfect away from the curb, and you'll be able to lower your bus a little bit, and they'll just be able to wheel themselves on or drive on a wheelchair. I've done that far too many times.
I can't wait now for you, Sean, to come do the Transpeak with Scott teaching it you for the video for one of our videos, right? And you'll be shocked to how DDA compliant Derbyshire area into Derby actually is. It's absolutely wonderful.
Let's put it this way: DDA compliant. I don't think they understand what DDA compliant is. I mean, especially where some of the bus stops are. You're dropping a passenger off, and you're dropping a passenger off at one bus stop, and you're dropping them onto a grass verge.
Yeah.
And you've got to drive that bus away before that passenger can make any movements afterwards.
There's that one on a certain route where you've got that hedge, and the hedge is grown out, so it's on the path. And if you pull away too soon, you're pretty much guaranteed to wipe the passenger that you've just let off the bus out with your tail swing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean,
go on.
Sorry, with you saying about the DDA, Jordan, obviously, and wheelchair use, obviously, and disabled passengers getting off the vehicle. Obviously, with you asking Kalen, obviously, what he would think of that. I mean, I remember having a complaint placed against me, and it wasn't the person in the wheelchair. Exactly the same as what you're saying. This person wanted his own independence. You pull up at bus stop every morning, and it's the same passenger, and he would not allow you to get out of your cab. If you got out of the cab, he would rant and rave at you, saying, obviously, he's capable, he's well capable of doing his stuff. I shouldn't be offering him help, blah, blah, blah. I remember one day pulling up to the bus stop, and this gentleman obviously got on the bus on his own accord in his wheelchair and put his pass on. And then lo and behold, I know it all passenger wrote a 3-page letter of complaint saying that I've broken all the laws. I mean, that's another thing I think as a new driver you've got to look out for as well, is obviously you've got to remember if somebody who is disabled or in a wheelchair doesn't want your help, you have to obviously follow what they say, because as soon as you start touching their wheelchair trying to help him, you're not giving him their independence, and you can actually be discriminating against him by helping him. But obviously other passengers don't realise that, which is why I got the complaint. Obviously it got quashed. There was a reason behind it. Obviously I had to do a full statement of the reason behind, and luckily the disabled passenger in the wheelchair made a written statement or a statement over the telephone advising that he doesn't want help from bus drivers. Therefore, obviously I've got away with that. But that's another thing you've got to watch out for as a new driver, is there's always somebody watching.
Yes.
Whether it's a disabled passenger or whether it's a passenger who's not got the right amount of fare, or there's a passenger who's going to tell you a little white lie that they've lost the wallet and things like that. And it's that sort of thing where you've got to make the decision, but you've got to also remember whatever decision you make, there's probably somebody somewhere on that bus who likes complaining, who's going to put a complaint, and it could be a malicious complaint. Reference, he let a person on the bus because he was flirting, or he didn't allow this person to travel because of this reason. And you've got to look at all perspectives. So you've got to just remember to be as polite and as professional, and just remember some things can happen like that. And as long as you keep a cool head, and obviously you try to remember things. I mean, I find it easy if I ever have an incident, should I say now, no matter what sort of incident it is, I carry a diary. And if I have an incident where a car cuts me up and I think a passenger's obviously moved forward a bit too much because I've braked hard because of the vehicle, next available bus stop, I will pull over and I'll put black car, pulled out, cut me up, blah, 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 this time. And then at least you've got a little bit of information there where if you do get pulled into the office, you can say, oh, yeah, I remember that on this day. It's about 4:15. I got cut up by this car.
Yeah.
So it's just always having something there. But as a new driver, that was something I would always obviously recommend somebody to do, which obviously have a little diary, have a little notebook, and if there's something which seems not right or something you feel uncomfortable with, just write it down, because if there's any comebacks, you've got a note of what actually happened.
Yeah, the other thing is, a lot of the complaints obviously come from passengers because they're the main people we have, but some do come from outer sources. But there's a lot of passengers that want to make everything on that bus their business, and including on how you're driving, and you've got to try not to let it get to you. But normally, as a rule of thumb, and I'm sure the others will agree, that normally if they complain to your face, you're pretty much safe, as long as you just are polite back to them. And being polite back to them is one of the worst things you can do, because it really angers them. But they're normally not gonna. They're normally not gonna complain. The people that normally complain are the ones you can hear whilst you're driving, but then say sod all to you as you're getting off. As they're getting off, they're normally the complainers. I mean, where we are now, a lot of our buses are in kilometres an hour, and the amount of complaints that we get for, oh, you're speeding when we're not, it's the case of, well, that's why we're the driver and you're the passenger. But you can't say that to them. But it's like, I'm sure, don't know if Sean's had the other one when you've had like a bus with a jerky gearbox. And I remember I had a woman that told me that I needed to relearn how to use the clutch. And she was quite shocked to find out they didn't have a clutch.
19530, that sometimes the gearbox doesn't want to play, and the most you can do is 30 miles an hour, being second gear and it revving the absolute back end of it.
Mhm.
It's like a bus that I was on a few days ago, where when you were braking, as soon as you hit 10 miles an hour, it just felt like it was slamming on the brakes by itself. And I think Scott and John, you've both driven that bus in the past week, so you probably know what I'm on about.
It's a retarder issue.
Yeah,
That's the be all to end all to it. But like you've just said now, as a passenger, if you wasn't well up, Caelan, knowing obviously what you know about vehicles and what you know about buses, then if you was a passenger, you would take that as the driver's driving like an absolute fool.
The older Magic buses in Manchester were like that, where you only had to sort of look at the brake pedal and the retarder would send everyone through the windscreen, and you couldn't help it because as soon as you press that brake pedal, you engage in the retarder. So you're engaging it at whatever level that bus is deeming that it thinks that you're applying it. And most buses will have several stages of retarder, but if that switch is maybe a little bit dicky, a little bit sticky, or got a sticky relay somewhere, you can be just resting your foot on the brake pedal and you can be engaging stage 3 retardation. And at that point, stage 3, you're being jerked forward no matter what, and there's nothing you can do about it. You've just got to sort of make the rest of the brake as smooth as possible.
So that's like when you were driving the company that we all used to work for, when you've got a Trident.
You mean the one with Margie's thong up the back of it at the moment? That one?
Does it have Margie's thong up the back of it?
Well,
have they actually relived it into that?
That's what it looks like, doesn't it?
Well, no, but Trident, you've got to feather the brakes, because if you don't, that retarder slams on and everyone gets jolted forward. That's what you're doing.
Go on.
I've driven Tridents. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you had the old Dennis Tridents, the old ones.
We went back.
Bloody hell, some of the retarders on them. The retarders would work, but the ABS wouldn't work. And as soon as you took the brakes, the retarder would kick in. You'd brake that hard that you'd get smoke coming from the back wheels where you've just skidded in a straight line.
17520 did that when I was on Metrolink replacement. I was pulling into the Media City, and that just locked up and I'm heading towards the back of a parked bus, and I'm like, it's not stopping. It stopped, but that's probably another thing to say is that when I passed, it was quiet season for the students. So, but then when the students come back, there's nothing like a full double decker, because it doesn't accelerate.
You can tell the difference. It's horrible.
It doesn't accelerate.
It
doesn't want to stop.
Load.
Yeah, it doesn't want to stop. When you turn the corner, it feels like it's going to tip over, and there's nothing like it. And I think that's the time when you really learn how to drive is when you've got a full swinging load. Because you've got
it's not even like it's the legal limits load. They are packed like sardines, and that's how they've always been. The student buses, they get packed like sardines, and sometimes you can tell when you've got weight on, you can tell when you've got no weight on. But when you've got a full bus and you're going down Wilmslow Road, it is horrible sometimes.
I
don't total agreement there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if you well, I'm sure you would have had the pleasure of a full bus, Scott.
Many a full bus, trust me, many a full bus.
But yeah, go on, sorry.
Did any of you ever get a chance to drive a Dragon?
No. Well, I've driven one at Town and District, and I can tell you, moving it around in Town and District, it's the worst experience I've ever had. And
Jordan, you need to block that out, please. No names, no company names. So I expect to hear a beep.
We can mention our lovely friends at Town and District Transport Trust.
Fair enough. That's good then. We can have a bit of advertisement.
It is an advertisement of some sorts for them. They do have a nice collection of vehicles. It's just that
I'll give him that.
the Dragon is not the best of driving vehicles, but I'm
Yeah.
sure when the owner has done it up, it will probably be quite a good vehicle and a rarity out that. But
When
no,
it's not eating its way through tyres.
well, yeah, the closest I got to oldest vehicles was like the Tridents, and then obviously learning to drive it was B10s when it was cold and you looked like a kangaroo trying to get out the depot in the morning.
Oh, I tell you, I remember my driving lesson, or my driving test. R897XVM was the registration of the vehicle I learned to drive in. Oh, what a dream. I do like the buses.
I regret when I joined because there weren't any B10s, so I didn't have a chance to drive one of the old B10Ms.
Oh, Sean, the B10Ms were just beautiful.
You're free.
I've heard for the first 20 minutes until the brakes got warm, and then they were beautiful.
Drum brakes
Oh.
were always like that, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They were nice vehicles to drive, and considering it had hardly any driver comforts, like the steering wheel could only go certain ways, etc. But
You were lucky if you
It
got
was the-
heating.
oh no, the ones I used to drive, there used to be a handle at the back of a XVM, and if it was cold, you just used to pull the handle up, and obviously that'd get the water running around the pipes, obviously to heat the bus up.
By the time
But
I
the only
joined,
thing
they all
is, after
broke.
half an hour, you had to turn the bloody heating off because it's like being in a sauna.
When I was learning to drive, I had the pleasures of a 2006 MAN lowliner with no heating.
You see, them lowline MAMs, the ALX300s, I used to really enjoy driving them buses.
I did.
I thought-
Yeah.
I
They're
think-
beautiful to drive.
I think to be fair, I think they were on par, in my personal opinion, with the Volvo B10Ms. They were beautiful to drive, and the amount of pickup they had when you were setting off from a bus stop was just unbelievable. I mean, really nice vehicles to drive. I mean, a lot of people didn't like driving them because of the tail swings. Now, anybody who's obviously coming into the bus industry as a new driver, a tail swing is the back of the bus. And I imagine just having J-Lo's backside.
Well,
You've got to watch where you're turning that bus, because otherwise you're going to be knocking somebody over, or at least you're going to be damaging street furniture.
well, the only thing I didn't like about the lowliners was how low you sat. And I know that's part of the name, but I've always been one that likes to sit up high so you can see over the traffic. And the lowliners, you sort of sat quite low in them. I felt low with a massive
Yeah, but
steering wheel.
See, I quite like that. I quite like that sitting quite low. And obviously, the size of the steering wheel was just unbelievable because you knew you were driving something big.
Yeah, but I've taken
Not
a
like
bus.
the-
I've taken a bus off you, Scott, and it's like getting in and sitting in an armchair.
Exactly. You've got to be comfortable whilst driving.
Yeah, you've got to be able to adjust everything to how it's suitable for you, essentially. That's if you're not comfortable, then I think it was 19463. I used to point blank always refuse to drive it because the seat had an extended handle to alter the backwards and forwards on it, and because of how I sit and a lot of drivers sat, you couldn't get comfortable because the bar would stick into your legs or it'd be in your way. So that got changed eventually when drivers actually started turning around and refusing to drive it, due to the fact that they couldn't get comfortable in it. But I've seen some weird seating positions over the years, and some of them
Yeah,
you get in,
so have I.
some of them you get in and you go, how the hell did they drive like this?
Oh,
Well,
God,
the
I
best
hate-
one is when you get in the bus after the tallest person in the depot, and for some reason the seat's all the way down to the steering wheel.
Yeah,
And bearing in
the
mind
steering
this-
wheel's up
this
in the
guy's
air.
like- Yeah, bear in mind this guy's like 6.5, 7 foot tall. Again, John, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm on about.
I do.
Oh, I'm afraid I don't think I know what you're on about, but obviously I know there's a.
He got a
There's a
nickname.
dra-
He got
It's
a,
got a name of Hightower.
yeah.
Oh yes, I know what you mean.
Yes, we can do nicknames.
But I've noticed there's certain drivers when I take a bus off where I'm at the moment, where the seat is at an angle where the front of the seat's pointing right down to the floor. and you think it's like they pretty much stood up whilst driving. And I think, how the hell, your stomach's touching the steering wheel, your back end's right up in the air, and the seat's that much forward. You think, how the bloody hell, it's like they're being folded up into an envelope.
Yeah, I've been on a few like that, and it's horrible.
The
And I
same.
just think you can't drive like that. You've got to drive, obviously, in a position where you can see everything properly. And if they can see everything properly in that position, then bloody hell, that's all I can say to that.
I'd feel sorry for the people that drive like that would maybe go back to preservation and go where the seat is the only thing that is adjustable, and adjustable being the fact it goes backwards and forwards. And sometimes it's difficult to see how they would go back and drive vehicles that were like that. And I know from obviously the experience of like certain drivers' attitudes towards driving, and I think it's something that, as the last thing in this podcast, as we're nearly at the end, could be addressed, is the fact of don't be a steering wheel attendant. I mean, a lot of drivers now, I've noticed it, and I noticed it when I was at my other companies as well, as if a bus has a defect, they just sort of don't bother with it. You know, it's sort of like, oh, I'm going to waste my ink on it. But then are very quick to complain when it's not been fixed.
Well, I can't say anything there because there's sometimes that I don't defect little things, but that's as a professional driver, I think there's something sometimes where you can get away with not defecting it and just have a quiet nudge of an engineer and obviously ensure that they look at that vehicle after you're telling them. But obviously, if it's a defect where it's going to obviously be causing a danger or something serious, then yeah, it should be defected.
Yeah, but
such as heating on buses, heaters need to be worked no matter what.
Yeah,
but you get some
by,
drivers, you get on the bus and it's blowing freezing cold day, and you think, why has it not been reported?
But even just telling an engineer you've still reported it, they've still got to log it down somewhere, because if they've used any parts, they've got to explain where the parts have gone. But sometimes, like heating, it can be a case of, oh, it's a tap that needs turning on. So sometimes it's worth just, if you're taking a bus back to a garage, then just going and seeing them yourself and going, look, do you want me to put it on the card? Most of the times they'll go no, and they'll fix it there and then. But
there's that, but there's also, with not being a steering wheel attendant when you're out on the road, if let's say you've got 2 or 3 lights on the dashboard, give it a quick, isolate it and turn it back on, rather than just calling it straight through, because that's what they're going to tell you to do. There's little bits you can do yourself rather than waiting and relying on other people. You do some of the work yourself and go from there.
Yeah, and probably not put stupid things on the cards either. Remember, it's a legal document, so don't go telling the engineers that the gearbox unfriends the engine when setting off. And other things like that we get sent loads of them, and I've seen loads of them when I worked for the other company. And you get in the bus and the first thing I do when I take one is you read the defect card. You read what's been wrong with it. And some of the things that are on there, you go, really? Anything from wrong types of mirrors to seat won't adjust or hard seats and stuff like that. I mean, certain companies would like you to report that sort of stuff, but you do get quite a lot of things that should be reported that never do get reported, like warning lights, as Sean said, being on. That's the biggest one. But even if you just hear a strange noise when driving along, and you're certain it's coming from the bus. So if you hear the engine might be knocking a little bit, or you think it might be knocking, or you think it's down on power, the bus, than what it normally was when you drove it 2 days ago. Sometimes stuff like that's worth mentioning, because that can be the start of an underlying issue which, addressed early, could possibly save an engine, a bus, or whatever, or could be a lot cheaper to fix than it would be if they let the fault develop.
I am in agreement with that. I mean, I don't know who it was who sent me a picture of an image of a certain company's condition card in reference to a green hybrid. Now,
yes.
a lot of drivers know that the hybrids use a gyro system to start driving forward. They have a forward gear and a reverse gear and no gears in between. but I don't know who it was who sent me the picture, but I recall looking at a picture where somebody's put, will not change gear. And every other first followed suit.
Yeah, but the other thing is, if someone's put something, read what it is. Don't just put as above, for the love of God, because as above means nothing. If it's still got the fault, you don't need to write as above. Just circle yes, because that's saying you're aware that bus still has that fault. By just keep writing as above, you're just wasting paper, and
I think.
Yeah, and it could happen that you're the 6th, 7th driver on that bus. Everyone else has, the first driver's filled up 3 lines with a defect, and then everyone else has put as above, and then you get a defect, and you've got nowhere to write it.
Which I've had that too many times.
Same here.
But there's, in a way, there's no defect that's not stupid enough to report, but you've got to be aware of, I think, a lot of companies will give you a handbook with what you can and can't take on the road, but if you don't feel comfortable taking something on the road with a defect that you believe, go see an engineer. If they say it's fine, get them to sign the card. If they sign that card, it takes it off you, because they're saying that the vehicle is fit to be on the road.
There's that, and there's also likes of bulb. I know we're meant to be ending up with bulbs. If someone's reported on the condition card that there's a bulb out, that bulb is still out. To engineer and get it fixed. It takes 5 minutes, if that, to change a bulb.
The big companies definitely, yeah. There's many times when I used to take a bus out of the big company's depot, and you'd get to it, and the driver one would have put bulb out, and then 4 drivers later, and it's still out, and you're like, why didn't no one when they brought the bus back in, take it up to engineering and get it done? But then you'd see them coming in at night, and the night router would still be parking them up rather than getting the bulbs fixed.
Yeah.
Or sending them back out in the dark with the bulb out, and you'd see drivers take them out with the bulbs out, and you're like, really? And
Not trying to set up again there, Jordan, but that's one thing. Obviously, when I worked for a certain company, obviously I had a little bit more of an insight, obviously, to what other people didn't have. But one of my main rules was, if I was routing, was if a vehicle come into the depot and it had either a mill light on or it had a headlight bulb out, the first place that vehicle went before it even went through the wash was 30 Bay.
Yeah,
up to the engineers, and get the engineers to rectify that fault. And then once it's been rectified, it can then go through the wash. And if it's ready, available for the evening shift, it can go back out. But if it wasn't ready for the evening shift, at least the engineers have got that vehicle up there to rectify that fault there and then. And then it saves time and effort in the following day.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I used to, when I was at the big company, I used to have my meal break, and I just used to watch the buses coming in and out. And being a bigger company, you obviously didn't get a chance to drive all the buses. It's not like the small company we're at now, where you're guaranteed virtually to drive the same bus 2 days later. But you'd see certain buses, and you'd see them for days with their headlights out. But that means, to me, that there's a driver in the morning, and that it's what boils me about it. It means that the driver in the morning can't have done his checks correctly, or has done his checks correctly and just doesn't care. And at the end of the day, you're taking that bus out on the public road, you've got your list, and you've had your training to what the vehicle has to have working on it. So there's no excuse for bulbs being out. If there's something wrong with it in the morning on a first use check, get it looked at. If it needs swapping over, they can swap you over and delay it for the engineers to look at a later date. And that's what they did a lot of the times at the bigger companies. They just gave you another bus, and then the engineers would sort it out later on.
And again, with that, if you do take it up to engineering to get it fixed, don't worry about being late. If you're late, you're late. You've got reasoning behind it.
Exactly. But there's nothing that boils me further than drivers who will check their vehicles and then take them out no matter what condition they're in. I mean, go on. Sorry.
No, go on.
No. You've got it loads of times when, like, I've taken them off on the road and they've got engine management lights on and they've got this light on and that light on, and you're like, and then you pick up the card, nothing's there. But yet you're the second driver, so you know that it was either on when they left the depot, or it's come on, and it's just a can't be arsed. And unfortunately, that's what I call a steering wheel attendant, and there's more and more in the industry now. And we're by no way saying that you need to be a bus nut. You know, you need to know what every type of bus is and all that. But just know what the warning lights are at least. Know what type of bus you're driving. Because there's so many that fill in accident forms and they'll be filling them in around you and they'll go, what type of bus is that? Well, you drive it. You should know. I mean, we're definitely not saying that you need to know every fleet number and all that stuff, but just know the vehicles you drive and know what's characteristic normal for the vehicles you're driving and what isn't.
I agree with that. I mean, I know we're coming to the end of the podcast, but I mean, obviously, Kaylin, can you give us a bit of an insight to why you would like to become a bus driver in the future? I mean, it's listening to somebody obviously who's not got the license yet. I mean, obviously, what's your input on obviously and reasoning behind wanting to take this career path? What you want to choose?
Well, when I was younger, I used to get on the bus with my nana quite a lot, and I always used to sit upstairs. I used to have the old Enviros, or it would be an ALX 300 or something, and I used to just listen to the engine sound, and sometimes I'd sit on one of the front seats and just watch what the driver does. And I always used to find it younger as a kid fascinating what happened, and then my nana would tell me like, oh, well, this is what they do, and then as I got older, I'd search into it a bit more, and then I started going out to places, and it just kind of got me into it.
Fair enough.
So going forward, obviously, is that one of the reasons behind obviously wanting to become a bus driver, or do you think from a young person it's a good career path to choose? I mean, from a career perspective, do you think it's going to be a good career, and obviously things like that?
I mean, I think it'll be a good career, yeah, because it will be like, because I've realised with bus drivers, I don't think one day is the same as another. There'll always be something different.
1 hour isn't the same from the other. You can do the same route 3 times in one day, and not one time it'll be the same.
Yes. So
I mean, obviously. Go on.
No, you go on. As you're saying.
I was just about to say, so obviously, from an insight, obviously, I know obviously you travel a lot on a lot of buses, and obviously you travel around with a lot of bus drivers. Yeah. Obviously, so is that possibly another reason why you're more into the progression of a career in buses, or is it just the bus operations and the way obviously the communities get help from bus drivers, which is drawing you to that way?
I think it might be a bit of both, actually.
Not very talkative, are you?
Well, no, I've just been kind of taking it in, isn't it? I don't drive buses, so, it's nice to hear someone else.
Yeah, well, you don't drive buses, but this is what we're saying, obviously, from an insight of a non-bus driver. Yeah. Would you say that this podcast has taught you anything, or have you took anything on board to obviously progress your career in the future within the bus industry?
Well, yeah, I have. I've listened, and it has taught me quite a lot about, how it all, like, what I'm looking for now, like, when you were saying about the diversions and, about how big companies, little companies, all that work.
It's the big companies and little companies are two totally different kettles of fish.
Yeah,
that's what I've learned.
I mean, Sean, why did you choose to become a bus driver, Sean? That's another question. Was it by choice? Was it obviously something what you've always wanted to do from being young, or was it just you see the advertisement and thought that's easy enough, I'll do that?
It was a bit of everything. I enjoyed driving, and I enjoy working with people. So I thought, I was getting bored of my current job, so I thought I'd apply for it, and I got the job, and there I was, and I looked at it. It was a guaranteed, because with the company I worked with, you had to do 2 years, otherwise you had to pay back money for your training and whatever else. But I looked at that as a guaranteed job for 2 years, and then COVID came around, and then cooled over a little bit. But I did enjoy it. But then with that, you've got a lot of responsibilities to take on, which I could handle. I enjoyed my driving. I didn't enjoy the shift pattern, but it is one of them. But then with the money that you earned, the money was good. I was in a bad position with money. So then getting the £12 an hour at 19, I'm on, with some people, double them up there on, and I'm getting paid weekly. So it meant that I could get a decent amount of savings, and a couple of other little bits. So there's a few factors with it. But if you enjoy driving and you can handle being up early and a couple of other little bits, I'd say do it, enjoy it while you can. If anything, you've always got the license there, which I've got the license there now, which has now enabled me to work with Jordan, whatever else. And if I want to go back to buses, it's there and I can do.
That's fair enough. I mean, Jordan, why did you choose to become a bus driver? What was your sort of initial wanting to become a bus driver?
I couldn't stand.
So,
I couldn't stand working at a certain German supermarket. For I can't think of a legal reason name that I can call it that rips it off, but it's
Just yellow and blue by any chance?
It is yellow and blue, but begins with an L rather than an A.
Well, there you go. I think everybody's got the idea.
But yeah, I was on good money there, but I just couldn't stand the four walls. In a shop, even though you obviously get different people every day, you feel like it's the same boring, mundane routine, where at least out on the road you have a different variety. But obviously it was a step up for money for me, but it was a bit nerve-wracking going as a non-licence holder first, because obviously they give you the job, but then you've got to pass the test. If you don't pass the test, you don't have a job. But because I'm sad and quite knowledgeable, I managed to get through it quite easily. So yeah, but yeah, it was just a different day every day, basically for me. But then I moved on from that to do coaching, and I enjoyed that. But unfortunately, for their company reasons, that didn't. I had to leave. Well, I left there, and then went back to where I started, and then I'm back where I am now. And to be fair, I started off there on a different side of the work than what I'm doing now, and that was, as saying, the shift patterns. They're better shift patterns than what I do now, but it's just one of them. It was more money at the time, and our buses need money, unfortunately. And I prefer driving bigger buses, to be honest. So yeah.
Here's a question, Shafir. Do you prefer the bigger bus companies or the little bus companies?
From my perspective, obviously I've had the option, like Jordan obviously said, I've had the option of working at a big company. I've had an option of working, obviously driving coaches with a smaller company, and obviously I've got the option to work for a smaller company where I'm working now. And what I seem to find is obviously the bigger operators, you seem to be just a number. You seem to be classed as a bum on a seat. Bigger companies, obviously,
easily replaceable.
Yeah, I mean, bigger companies obviously have got the attitude, in fact, they're untouchable. They will just treat you as a number. You're a driver, you're to drive a job and to make them revenue. I find, obviously, when I was on the coaches, obviously, it was a total different kettle of fish, full stop, because obviously the role was a lot different than what Jordan's was. Obviously, I was driving on an airfield at the back of £1 billion worth of planes.
Yeah.
Had to take a different test and all the rest of the stuff. So obviously, doing that sort of thing, it was another big insight, and obviously into the bus industry and coach industry. I mean, I fully enjoyed that. And then obviously COVID came along. Obviously, it started killing the industry. Obviously, coaches, I don't think are going to be back up and running to the full potential until at least middle to the end of next year. I mean, especially with the variant what's going around at the moment, it could jeopardise the coach recovery even more. But what I find that with the company I'm working for now is it seems to be smaller companies. You get more of a family sort of feeling. You get more of respect, I think, from managers and supervisors, and you get more of a rapport with a team, rather than you being part of a team of, say, 400. You're only a team of about 150. With this different sections of work, obviously you've got the big bus and you've got the little bus.
That doesn't narrow it down to who we're on about.
Well,
but yes,
it doesn't much. But all I'm going to say is, let's say teams. Then, I mean, Jordan can edit that bit if he wants. But you've got one team A and team B. So obviously, B, obviously being for big. Because there's only
What's
certain
A
amount of
for?
drivers
Acute?
Yeah, we'll go for that. They are like buses, aren't they? But what I'm trying to say, though, is if you're not having as many drivers on that rota system, you seem to speak to the drivers a lot more. So it's a lot easier if you've got a family issue or you've got a family problem or you need a certain rest day for whatever reason or you need to do something in your personal time, you've got more of a chance in a smaller business in swapping with somebody else because you speak to that person on a daily basis. You've got more of a chance of helping each other as a team than what you have when you're in a bigger operator, because obviously big operators, there's that many people there. You might work for a business for 2-3 years and you might not see a certain person. All of a sudden, you can have somebody come up to you and say, excuse me, but you're on that shift next week, I need them shifts. Can you swap? And you think, who the hell are you? I've been here for 2.5 years and I thought I've never seen you before. Yet they've been working for the business for that long. So from my personal perspective, I would say the smaller bus companies and bus operators, at the moment, are sort of tending more to be a little bit better than big companies. The only thing what I find is a bit different is obviously it's the rates of pay.
Yeah,
I mean, you go for smaller companies, I think the rates of pay are slightly different because obviously they haven't got as much revenue coming in. But from a driver perspective, I think you're a lot happier in a smaller business because you get to know your passengers, you start having a better rapport with passengers, you start getting to know the people who constantly get on your vehicles. I mean, Jordan, how do you feel, Jordan?
I'd double with what you said, but I'd also add the fact that with the big companies, you can always feel like you're watching your back to, what they're going to get me for next. And I do find with the smaller companies, especially, that they're a lot more chilled out. I wouldn't say you get away with murder, but you're a lot more chilled out as you're not just, as you say, a number to them. You're a vital member of their team, and you're not watched every second of you every day on trackers, and you're not as easily contactable on a radio to be shouted at than do the famous one on the radio of, can you come see us when you get in? Because as soon as they say that, your mind is going to, what have I done?
Most of the time, it's just, can you do a bit of overtime tomorrow or after your shift?
Yes.
But your mind starts panicking that you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
It does. It goes 10 to the dozen.
Yeah, especially when the radio call and you'll be like, 19426. Yeah, Jordan, when you come in, can you see Keith, please? It's nothing to worry about, but can you see him? Well, if it's nothing to worry about, why are you contacting me? Tell me when I get in.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
the other worst one that they used to do was they used to put your name on the sign-on sheet that they used to highlight you off. You'd be on like a Friday, you'd be signing on at 6 o'clock in the evening, and on the thing would be, see Nick or Keith. But they're not in till Monday, so you've got 2 days of driving where you're going, what have I done? What have I done? And when it happened to me, I went in on Monday and it was, oh, you just got a letter of accommodation. Right. So 2 days of worrying over what they got me in the office for, and all it was that. And I felt that was an unfair thing that they used to do. But especially working as the smaller team with lead drivers, it's the case if you walk through the door, it's morning everyone, and if they need you, they just pull you aside for a second, and it's done with. And a lot of the conversations we have, I find it's the case if you just have it in front of other people, because it's the case of everyone has the to and fro and input. It's only if it's very private they pull you to the side. That's what I found anyway.
Everybody knows what's going on. You can have a craft before you've even got back to the depot.
Yes.
The whole depot knows.
Yes, and as soon as you walk through that door, you go, what have you hit, you silly sod?
Unlike a certain company, it's here's your notice, you're suspended until the pending investigation. See you in 2 days.
Yeah, there's with the big companies, it's more you're guilty and you have to prove you're innocent, where with the little ones you're possibly more innocent before proving guilty, and they'll check everything first before going and throwing the hammer at you in the bookcase and everything else and your warning letters and all that. They'll make sure they've got everything and heard your side of the story first, because your side of the story makes up a lot of it. But we're going to have to end this now, because we're now at an hour and 20 minutes for what was
Well, that's all right.
for our podcast.
Well, it's right, because before you go, obviously, Sean, have you ever worked for any smaller bus operators, or have you just worked for the one operator?
No, it's just the one that I've worked for.
And how did you feel about working for that one operator? Have you got any insight before this is like blogs ended?
Same as what Jordan said. There was one incident which was my last RTC, let's call it, before I had left. And for that, I had a van. I was in the bus lane. He was in the lane next to me, about car's length in front of me. He's then decided he's going to put his indicator on last minute, turn left up these tram lines, and stop dead in the middle of the road right in front of me while I'm doing 20 miles an hour. And that was down as my fault, because I should have anticipated and expected it. But he was turning down tram lines, and I got a verbal warning from that. And they did want to give me more, but I argued it out. But yeah, I work for a smaller operator, but for big operators, they're good, because they can offer more money and whatever else. But you are just a number. And if they can find something to penalise you for or get rid of you for, they will do. That is the thing that lets them down.
That's why they send inspectors,
Yeah.
otherwise known as little Hitlers.
Yes.
No comment.
Little Hitlers.
No comment, Jordan.
I've had my fair
That's very hurtful.
running ins with inspectors.
That's very hurtful, Jordan.
Oh, do you want your feelings attending to?
They're not all like that.
No. I'll give you that. I have had one or two inspectors where they've caught me doing stuff I shouldn't be doing, especially things at the bigger companies where it's definitely a big no-no, and they've pulled me to the side and gone like, I'm not going to report you this time, but if anyone else has seen you do it, I can't do anything about that one, and you're on your own. And you sort of go, you sort of go paths, and you sort of like go, yeah, fair enough. Cheers, mate. See you later, and you're gone. But other ones will write you up for everything.
But with that, it's the little things like that make you appreciate it, because it will actually make you watch out and whatever else.
No, it didn't.
I think I used to be quite fair.
I think I probably did run into you as an inspector, and I would have never had an issue with you, because otherwise I would have remembered you.
Well, there you go.
So, but there's a few inspectors that I remember, and I see him stood on the 192 stop, and you just want to think, what an ass, But
that's another thing with inspectors. They don't do the job that they're, like they used to do years ago. You'd see them on your bus regular, checking tickets and whatever else. Whereas now all they do is find ways to penalise you for leaving late.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, the role of an inspector has changed, but I'm sure we can cover that on episode 2 of our podcast, which will get out on the 1st of February. Because we're definitely going to end this now, because we're now up to about an hour and a half virtually.
23 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's it.
I think that makes quite a good one. And if you've appreciated our little podcast and want to hear more, then do follow us. You're not too sure where you're going to find this podcast yet, but wherever you found it or wherever we link it, make sure you follow us on that, and we'll make sure that we keep up with it, because I've found it quite enjoyable actually to have a general chin wagon about work life and things, and I'm sure there's plenty of other things we can cover and things that the listeners would like us to cover in future.
I mean, I think it'd be nice if the listeners obviously did comment, obviously, what they would like to hear. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of bus driver stories what we could obviously enlighten people's lives with. I mean, there's lots of things obviously we could discuss bus-wise, whether it's either certain routes at certain times of the night, certain areas, things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
There's certain things we can't mention, obviously, but we'll do our best to change things where we can to make it so we can tell a story or whichever. But and I'm sure we'll try and get some other drivers on here as well to tell their stories. But yeah, anything else to add?
No, I think that's it.
No, I think that's it.
Good.
I think that's it.
Right, so follow us on patreon.com/MancBuses, where you can get early access to everything and support our channel. And that's about it, because I need to dash now. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I was going to say watching them, but you're not watching, you're listening. And stay tuned for our next one. See ya!
Bye.